Sure, John. Just bringing up my screen. Okay, the first one that we have for today comes from Synchron. So Synchron is now integrating GenAI speech to brain in, GenAI into its speech to brain interface software.
All right. My favorite part about this article is they talk about the the implementation of this brain device is not that big a deal. Anyway, Tim, what do you think?
I think this is a really fun and interesting article, and I've got a soft spot in my heart for it because I spent a couple of years in ALS research, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, a bad disease that takes away all your motor function. And that's one of the primary aims of these brain-computer interfaces, is to enable people who have lost limb function and speech to be able to communicate and potentially use limbs as well. This one's more about communication. I'd have to rate it optional for the AI leader unless you're in, this particular field, in which case it's very important, maybe essential. But it's another advance in these brain-computer interfaces, and an obvious thing to do. I'm surprised somebody hasn't already done it. Again, you don't have to, this is a classic case too, where, okay, if it spits out the wrong stuff every once in a while, hey, that's better than nothing, which is your alternative in this case, or a very slow and laborious process of getting words out of a person who's lost a lot of motor function and speech function. So terrific for patients, an obvious thing to do, optional for the general enterprise leader, but an interesting and quick read.
What do folks think? Coming down on optional.
Yeah, optional. One thing that I noted, that they made an investment in the hardware company that enabled that interface. Yes. So it has to come as a package essentially, but optional.
Yep. All right. I'm coming down on optional unless I hear otherwise, but simply amazing technology. I mean, we're as they say, technology goes from magic to, to important to, just part of the background. And here we have human computer interfaces, coming from neural activity into words for people who are incredibly crippled. Just amazing when you think about it. All right. Next, please, Ankash. But that is optional.
Next one comes from A16Z, and they talk about how the AI future is already here, but it's not just productized yet.
All right, Paul, what do you say?
Yeah.
Essential or nothing burger?
Yeah. And John, just a quick thing. If your microphone, you have to hold it that close. We're getting a little bit of feedback. So this is an article from Andreessen Horowitz for Angela Strange. Andreessen's publishing good stuff here. I initially had this as optional, but it's a short article. I reread it. I thought they had an interesting point for discussion where AI agents are good for certain tasks. These keep scrolling down, guys. Yeah, keep going. I got you. Yeah. So vertical solutions drive efficiency for moderately skilled teams. I thought that was an interesting assertion. And if you go down a little further, they talk about how horizontal works with certain knowledge workers here. So I thought it was interesting framing. It's a short article, and I had it as important.
All right, we got one for important. What do folks think? Adam, what do you think on this one?
I don't know. It seemed like they made a lot of really obvious assertions, and then they kind of just sprayed and prayed and threw a lot of products and vendors out there. I think it would probably do more to confuse me as an AI leader than actually provide me much insight. I had it as optional personally.
All right, we go.
I would support important because I think it actually grouped things and said they're not out there yet, but they're very certainly coming, right? And so it's a useful read because grouping is quite good. And I think there was a sentence where I'm looking. I'm looking.
Tim, I'd be interested in your opinion. I mean, from an AI leader standpoint, does agents need to be on their radar screen, or do they need a point of view on agents as they start thinking about 2025 planning? For sure, we're not going to do agents next year because it's still too early and there's still too much unknowns. We need to do some pilots, interesting, but still early.
I think, you know, I had sort of a bipolar reaction. I had both reactions. But my first reaction was the Adam reaction, which is, and also, by the way, I didn't look up the companies, but I bet dimes to dollars. All these companies, or many of them, are in the AZ.
I was wondering that.
Of course.
They're basically talking their book. You know, here's the future, and we own it all. So you should buy all this stuff that we're investing in. So there's a little bit of that. But on the other hand, it does at least categorize things. It's a quick read. And so I could say, okay, yeah, I want to read this article just to get a sense of where the investment is occurring, because they are investing in these companies. Some of these companies are going to be important, and they have some sense of where the money is flowing, and that's useful to know. So I wouldn't argue with important, more from an industry structure and investment standpoint than particular products or ideas. I think, I think it's you know, this is the year of slogging. Things are getting into production for the advanced companies, and for the regular companies, they're starting to realize, okay, I really do need to do this, and it's going to take some work, but I can do it, and I can do some things pretty quickly. So,
All right. So, sorry.
what it feels like. Sorry.
All right, we're going to land on important, and you know, I'm reminded of our wins framework and some of the stuff we published before, you know, in terms of where the opportunity might be, and also the order of magnitude, you know, 10, 20, 30% improvement. People are going to need to do this. All right, A16Z coming in with some okay content. Next, Ankaj.
Hey, the next one comes from Petronas AI. So they have launched something interesting related to hallucinations. So it's a state-of-the-art open source hallucination detection model.
All right, we have links out here with its model and a new benchmark. Surprise, surprise. Their model works well with their benchmark. All right, Adam.
Yeah, I've been doing some hallucination benchmarking myself recently as part of a research project, and so I was very interested in this. I'm going to say it's important, and I'll make the case, but I was on the fence between optional and important. It's probably the biggest problem still with using large language models in larger contexts is the hallucinations, and we need better ways to measure and detect the hallucinations, and it looks like they have a state-of-the-art approach here, and that's worthwhile. So they're really onto two things here. One is Lynx, which is their new model that actually detects the hallucinations, and then the other is a new benchmark which has 15,000 questions and answers, which is quite an extensive data set called HalluBench, as in hallucination benchmark. So look, I think they're on the right path. I think it's important, maybe not even this new specifically, but the trend and the importance for our AI leader to be considering what are they doing around hallucination detection and benchmarking that. One of the examples it gave in there was like in medical answers for PubMed QA, it was over 8% more accurate than GPT-4o at detecting medical inaccuracies. So when you have tools that are actually pushing the envelope and getting better at identifying when these large language models aren't giving the correct answer, that's an important step forward.
All right, so we've chinned the bar just into important in an area that Adam is deep. Other thoughts?
I was I was more on the optional side. I can go with important. You know, the thing is that, again, these benchmarks, nobody's benchmarking the benchmarks. And so it's hard to have confidence in what they're actually testing. And while their results were improved, and it's interesting, they were improved by, the technical term is, I think, a scooch. It wasn't like they dramatically improved things, but they did improve them, so that's good. And they proved them on this benchmark, but I don't know how much I believe this benchmark really measures what counts to an AI leader. So, you know, interesting. I'm glad people are at least thinking about it. I think there are more interesting things to read.
So Adam, we need to ask AI robots, what's least, a scooch or a smidgen?
All right, I'm headed for important. Any last gasps here to make the case for something else?
I think important it is. I was also between optional and important, but decided that it is such a critical topic, and they introduce this set that at least you can use to find hallucinations. So I think it is important.
All right.
Read.
We're going for important on this new benchmark in the self-promoting world of AI. All right.
Hey, before we leave there, John, have we ever seen an article where someone said there's a new model that didn't perform well on a benchmark? I'm assuming if it doesn't, you don't release it and you keep testing.
Right. Yes, of course.
Well, and you define your own benchmarks. To John's
true, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's the Wild West, right? We had, and many years ago, with certainly at the beginning of the internet in terms of different performance things, but then, software, back before we had a lot of the standardization. I mean, this feels to me, from what I've read from history, because I wasn't, in the business at the time, what software and computers were like in the 60s and 70s, right? We had way more competition, people dealing with, fundamental things, creating new operating systems, building machines that, only ran certain kinds of software. I mean, the full stack is, up in the air right now. So kind of interesting. Okay, important. Next, Ankash.
The next one comes from Ethan Mollick, and he talks about how we can, how weird the prompting of AI still is.
Yeah, interesting. Luda, I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan, but here we are at the bridge, star date 43.62. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought that it is worth a read, so I rated it as important. And the reason being, the author certainly got very much into it and did a lot of testing of various prompts, looked at the literature. So he has certain conclusions of how this works or doesn't work, and that models pick up certain angles, but he arrives at a really, just supplying more context and supplying it well is probably the right way to go. So it's a worth reading type of article, I think.
Yes. Other thoughts?
I think it's important, but sort of I have a more negative view of things here a little bit. This is one of those articles that really makes you pause and say, man, these things are, talk about the wild, wild west. This is, only much more dangerous. Feels like a little bit like being a test pilot, and, not much safety netting here. So the fact that these models are still so poorly understood that a modest change in inputs causes dramatic change in outputs. John, I'm sure you probably know this, and I don't know if the others do. We call that chaotic behavior. And that's not great when you're trying to run a business. So, the downsides aren't necessarily terrible, but they're there. And what it says is the upside is hugely variable on things that are poorly understood. So you've got to get yourself around the fact that, well, there's a threshold that's still valuable. You can get to a certain threshold that's still valuable, so it's worth doing. But man, it's just a crazy world right now where you've got these devices that are so variable to such minor changes in inputs.
Yeah, I thought it was very. Go ahead, Luda. No.
I'm sorry. This is a very good point, Tim. And this is one more reason to actually rate it as important. People are kind of
that's what I'm saying. That's my reason for rating it important, is to really get your arms around, pay attention, folks.
Yeah.
You gotta, to get to the thresholds of making this stuff valuable, you have to know about this part of it as well.
Yes, I thought. Oh, go ahead.
No, I think, Tim, just to highlight Tim's point, I think also then for the AI leader, as you think about your 18-month roadmap, you really have to keep human in the loop here. You really got to be skeptical of, non-human in the loop agents, because variability is very real.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. Ethan said, look, you start to understand the personality and kind of attitude of the model and how it thinks. And he said that happens in about 10 hours. I think that's a little too little, but whatever. The other thing I thought was kind of interesting here and is, his feeling, and I agree with him that, look, for simple tasks, you can do lots of things pretty easy with easy prompts, and the technology is likely to continue to evolve to give you the AI to help you create a prompt to help you get what you want from the AI. But there's still going to be a need for, things like, chain of thought reasoning and so forth that is going to be more complex. Ankash, I don't know if you could go up above as well. He's got a link to his.
I was having him scroll down to number 2 there first for just a second, if he could.
Sure.
I did want to just call attention to this. He calls out 3 prompting techniques that do work fairly consistently, and they've been my experience as well. So it's worth, if nothing else, making sure people dial in and pay attention to what are the known variables and what we can control.
Yes. Great suggestion. All right. So important it is. Ankaj, what's next?
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay, the next is a research paper which talks about Internet of Agent.
Timothy, what do you think of this new framework that our Chinese brethren have brought to us?
Well, reminding everybody that it's Chinese, and so it's probably got security issues as well. It's okay. I don't think it's anything earth-shattering, but it's sort of an obvious idea that somebody's actually done something about. So the internet is a good way of communicating, and most dynamic systems, that is systems that use more than one LLM, have been closed. They've just been some proprietary router, and they get some things together and use them, and it's very limited and it's very controlled. This is suggesting a more open architecture. I wouldn't call it an internet of agents. That's probably a stretch. But metaphorically, I suppose what you could say is they're saying create standard protocols. That's kind of like the internet, and enable any set of agents to be used together rather than limiting yourself to a closed set that you design. So great. It's kind of researchy. I'd say optional. If you're a geek and you're interested, read it.
Yeah, it reminds me of a bunch of general architectures for intelligence kind of papers and thoughts that were from the 80s. I think they're just at the agent level, but Tim, you and I remember, okay, you have a semantic processor, you have, decisions.
Yeah.
I mean,
and actually, I think it was yesterday, right? You guys talked about Peer, the DeepMind thing that lets you have basically an infinite number of agents connected.
Sure.
So this is something we've talked about many times, that it's not entirely clear yet. There really isn't enough data and good enough benchmarking to know whether the general horizontal large models or these mixtures of small models will do better. Everybody intellectually believes the small models will do better. I'm with them most of the time, but it's an intellectual belief. We don't have the data yet.
Yes, absolutely. Others?
I want to make a case for important.
Okay.
So I really, personal opinion, I really think that the distributed architectures will be the performance booster, and they show that, right? And will actually be the infrastructure or structure of what would happen. So they're also experimenting with agents being selected in real time for the specific tasks. And so there's several things in this paper that are, I think, quite trendy and important. So I ended up saying it's important to read, because I think it might be one of the futures, one of the paths to the future.
Yeah, I hear you, Luda. I'm actually coming down more on optional, because it is a framework. It's not implemented anywhere. I agree the trend is important, but I think at the margin, I'm going to give it the big O. All right. Optional it is. Akash,
The
next.
chalks come out, Adam.
I was going to say, Luda, you swayed me for what it's worth. So
Okay, well, we have to. No, and I think the fact, see, Chinese are struggling. Another point, it's not,
Yes.
and it shouldn't be the swinger here, but Chinese are struggling with the LLMs and have an LLM that actually works competitively. This might be their way to getting ahead.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think that
We'll see.
I think it's interesting how much they're publishing on, architectures, frameworks. You know what I mean? We've seen quite a few of those from either Chinese nationals in China or Chinese nationals in Canada or the U.S. working groups to work on architectural parts of this.
Yeah, think about it. They say, okay, let's give up on creating the best LLM, right? Let's just use whatever people have created and do it best.
All right, so we're heading toward important. Am I going to have to overturn myself here? Okay, all right, we're going to go for important. All right,
All right, thanks.
And,
all right.
and for what it's worth, John, it is actually available right now.
Oh, okay. I was wrong about that. Thank you, Adam. All right, so important it is. Next, Ankaj, I think we're down to our last article, which is about Intuit.
Yes, John. So the last one is about Intuit and how it is using generative AI, and it talks about various examples on how Intuit is using GenAI.
Yes, Paul and I were at this conference, and let me say that the AV there was really hard. Saw the presentation, it was very hard to hear, but the content looks interesting. All right, Adam, you gave this the big E, which you don't hand out very much. What's up?
Yeah, when I started reading it, I thought it was optional because it looked like a couple of use cases.
Sure.
And as I read further, it sort of strayed into the realm of important as they got into more of the details around their approach. And when I got to the end of the article where it's actually going into sort of across all of their products, the ways they're using Gen AI, it's basically like a playbook, I felt, almost, in terms of what other companies should really be paying attention to in terms of what's the most important to be doing. Yeah, scroll down just a little further, Ankaj, and you'll see it starts just here. No, keep going. You'll see it starts coming in bold. Yeah, there you go. See, integrating AI to simplify complex tasks, automating routine operations, ensuring high quality data, and it just goes on. They're all really great insights. Managing latency in the systems, adopting multi-cloud strategy, creating a composable architecture, personalizing user experiences, a roadmap that expands AI application use cases. Like it's just a lot of really powerful insights in one place.
Yes.
And the fact that they're actually walking the walk, I felt this was something that absolutely should be paid attention to.
And they have 100 million customers.
Yeah, and they had 24 million that used it at tax time last year.
I agree. I don't give essentials hardly ever, and I would agree to make this one essential. Because my first reaction, I think like Adam, I thought this was a puff piece, and it kind of is a puff piece. But a really good one for the AI leader because, and in fact, the very last one before this have a roadmap, which is kind of, okay, everybody should have a roadmap. But the one right before that is really critical. And I may even try TurboTax just to check this out. Mm-hmm. Because this, I think, is the model of the future, which is they put their rules-based, deterministic, whatever you want to call it, symbolic reasoning tax model together with generative AI to explain it. That seems to me brilliant. Okay, so you're not going to get your taxes wrong, but the problem with using most people who have any even modest complexity in their taxes beyond very straightforward stuff, if you're not a W-2 employee and you got a small business, you're at 1099, you got all these expenses and all this other stuff going on. You roll over an IRA, you do a bunch of things that are pretty normal, not that far outside the normal stuff. And yet you go through the tax stuff and you're like, gosh, did I do that right? Am I going to get audited? Am I going to get fined? And there's really no way to know because the tax code thanks to our Congress, is incredibly, complex, and they like it that way because then they can hand out favors. That's another subject. But the point is, for a normal human being, even smart, well-educated, studious human beings, it's really hard to figure out whether you've done your taxes right or not.
Sure.
So the combination of, yep, we're pretty sure we've got the rules right. And by the way, if you're nervous about how it got done, here's a reasonable explanation of how it happened with citations even back to the law. 2 thumbs up.
Yeah,
all right.
really well. So I just want to compliment the rule base with Gen AI. I think it's really a powerful combination, and this is a really good example.
Yep, and as Adam said, the rest of it is a really good playbook. It's just really nice, and they're a significant company. They're not, an enormous company. They're not in the Fortune 10, but they're, what were they, $6-7 billion a year company. So it's not a trivial company. And they have integrated this all the way across. So in the back pocket, upper left corner, this is front pocket right there. This is the first one. This is the first one I want to pull out. Look at this company here, okay? They're doing it everywhere.
I would bring out the pocket protector as well. No, it'll be one of the first places that a lot of people see compound AI, right? Because a lot of people do their taxes, so it's going to be interesting. All right, so we give it the essential. Ankaj, give us the tote board, if you will. Fascinating. I mean, I think in terms of the application, some of these things I think are going back to very old concepts. Like if you look at some of the if you think back in the history of mainframe computing, right, where you start to define the operating system, job control language, stuff like that. A lot of that stuff's getting reinvented now with these models. But the good news is the people who are doing it, are so young that they have no idea that they're reinventing it. Okay, great.
And therefore are likely to reinvent all the bad stuff. We hope not, but
one never knows. Anyway, all right. So we have an optional, lots of important, oh my goodness, important, and one essential. I think I might go back and change the Internet of Agents to being optional. No, I'm kidding. All right.
I thought you were going to say you'd make Synchron important.
No, I wasn't going there. Okay, so we have a lot of category reading to make time, and one essential in terms of a market leading company in their domain, having a fantastic approach and really kind of a roadmap for many product-based companies or any kind of company combining, deterministic and probabilistic systems in a good way for customers. Yep. All right. Anything else? Go ahead.
There's one point that I forgot about in the AZ article, the A16Z article, about the productization of these things and the state we're in, which was the one thing that really caught my attention that I think they might be right about, but we'll have to see how it plays out, is that major fixed platforms are under more threat than people realize. And they cited ERP and CRM in particular. And I think they're right about that. But again, that's a prediction. We'll have to see how it works out. The Empire Strikes Back comes to mind. So these firms are large and strong and well entrenched, and they aren't going to sit there and roll over and die. But the ability to sort of do things with a lot of leverage and few people that are much more flexible, and again, going all the way back to the beginning of this thing is a UI, So John, I responded to your LinkedIn thing about UIs. I've been writing about that right from the start. The biggest issue here is the enabling of normal humans to get at very complex capabilities. And that's basically what all these big systems do, is they try and simplify complex processes. So
yeah, well, I think it's UI. I think it's integration, as you can see from this thing. And I think it's also being able to go back and, when you have to, renovate the underlying code. So that's a very powerful combination. New UI, new kinds of integration, and then going back and, where necessary, redoing parts of the code base. And those three things together are incredibly powerful. I agree with you. I think, what's the saying? Old age and treachery beats youth and exuberance every time. So I think that
we'll see.
We'll see.
Microsoft
see what happens.
is still the most valuable company in the world.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes. And old age and treachery does come to mind with those folks. Okay.
Yeah, John. Real quick, I'll put in a plug. We had a great learning lab last night with Sid from Swirl about how to RAG your data without a vector database. Absolutely fascinating. That's now up on our YouTube. It's at youtube.com/GAI Insights. Go check it out.
Yeah,
Adam, I thought that conversation was great last night with Sid. Really,
fantastic.
really fantastic. Yeah.
All righty. Well, thanks everybody, and to our audience. Hope to see you tomorrow as the AI turns goes on. Thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Work on that one.